Excel accounting practice problem. Create accounting worksheet part number 1. Get ready because we're about to excel with Excel. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. We're going to be creating our information in a blank worksheet, so you don't need anything special to move forward. However, if you have access to this Excel workbook, you will have 2 tabs on down below, one being an example tab, the second being a practice tab, the example in essence being an answer key. If we go to the example tab, this is what we will be creating. It could look a little bit intimidating. I'm going to scroll into 130 on the view to make it a little bit larger, but we're going to do this in a step-by-step process. If you're able to construct this worksheet, then you'll have a much better understanding of how the accounting process will work. We're going to be constructing then on the left-hand side, the data input where the journal entries would go. This would be recording the normal transactions. We're going to then make our chart of accounts. We're going to try to color code it, practicing our Excel skills in order to do that for the formatting purposes. And then we're going to put in our balances, which are just going to be hard-coded numbers to start out. So this is going to be our beginning balances. Then we'll have our entries column. We're adding the entries column so that we have that nice transparent look to see our beginning balances and then our entries as we test transactions in the future part of the practice problem. Then we have the ending trial balance, which is just the sum of these 2 columns. Then we have the general ledger. The general ledger is going to be giving us the information per account, but it's going to be given it by date. Once again, we'll color code it, the general ledger tying into the trial balance, which will become more apparent as we construct this thing in a step-by-step process. The general ledger, of course, is a huge item, so that'll take us a while to construct. And then we've got the accounts receivable subsidiary ledger. We'll talk about later the accounts payable subsidiary ledger, and then we'll get to the inventory subsidiary ledger. And so, and next we'll get to the actual financial statement. So it's a comprehensive type of worksheet. We're going to break it down in a step-by-step process and say, okay, why are each of these components necessary? We're going to start off with basically this, and then this component with the trial balance. So let's go over to the practice tab. Once again, we just have a blank tab here, so that's where we're starting. I'm going to increase the size of it. So I'm just going to basically bring it up. I'm holding down Control to 130. So the first thing I'll typically do is format the entire worksheet to the general format that I would like to see with regards to the numbering. To do that, I'll select this triangle up top, or you can say Control A to select the whole thing. Right click on it. I'm going to say format the cells. Let's format all the cells. I like to go to currency down below. And then I'm going to go to not the red brackets, but just bracketed in black so I can color code some of my numbers as I choose. If I put the red there, they'll turn red when they're negative, and I don't want them to do that. I'm not going to have any dollar sign. I'm going to remove the decimals. So there we have that. And so that's going to be our general numbering. So if I put a number in here, it's got no decimals, and there it is. I like to have it bolden. So I bolded the entire worksheet too, as you can see. So we have an emboldened type of worksheet. Then we'll just start to construct our data input. So when we think of a journal entry, I'm going to put the headers up top. It'll typically include a date. Then we're going to have the accounts that will be impacted, tab, debits, and then credits. Let's put debits, credits. So that's going to be my header. I'll typically make the headers black and white. So I'm going to select the headers up top. Going to go to the bucket in the font group, home tab, font group. Hit the bucket. Let's make those black, and then we'll make the lettering here on the A white, black and white on the lettering. And then I'll often center. Sometimes I like the accounts not to be centered, so I'll center like these 2 and maybe the date one. So let's go to the alignment area and center them. And then I'll go to the date, maybe alignment and center. And then I want to make the accounts a little bit larger, so I'm going to put my cursor between F and G. So where it looks like that, left click on it, and we'll drag a bit to the right. So now we've got a bit more space there. So now we'll do a little bit of the formatting on the date area. I'd like to format it in such a way that I see the date. So there's a couple ways you can do that. You can hit the number drop down here, and you could say, okay, I want to see it like a date type formatting. How about a short date? So if I said 01, 02 or something like that, there it does it. But notice it gives me the year there. And really, I don't want the year because I want to make it like a generic type of problem. So I'd like it to just say 115. So I'm going to try to do a special date range formula to just show that and not give me the year. So I'm going to go to the right click on that, and I'm going to go down to the format cells to do that. And notice that it's going to the type that I have here. It's in the date format. I'm in the number area, date format, and you can see the date format here. I'd like to adjust, in essence, that formatting. If I'm on that formatting, and then I go to the bottom here, and you can see I got one 314. They actually have it right there, 314. That's the one I'm going to pick. If they didn't have that, sometimes I don't think they always do without the year, then you can go onto this date range. You can go to the bottom and you can customize it by simply taking off the year. So here's the format that's currently there. I'm going to say, okay, I'm just going to remove the year component. So let's get rid of the year, and I'm going to do the month and the day, the month and the day, and then we'll just say okay. And so there we have it. So there's the month and the day. So that formatting, then I'm going to copy that formatting down. I'm going to put my cursor on the paintbrush button to do that. That copies the format. And I'm going to paintbrush that all the way down for quite some ways so that everything we put into these cells will be a date format. So there we have that. And then I'm going to make this one a little bit smaller. I don't need it to be this wide because now I got a small date there. The date shouldn't take up much room. So let's make it around that size. And then the accounts, we'll have to probably adjust this one depending on how long the accounts are, but we'll keep it where it's at. And then I'll typically put the data input to be some kind of blue, some other cell where I tend to work, to have a different color for people doing the data input, even if it's me doing the data input, because I like to be able to visually see where my eyes are supposed to go to change things, and where my eyes can tell very quickly that these are things I'm not going to do the data input typically. So I'll right click on it. I'm going to format the cells here, and typically then I will make them the font. Actually, let's do the font up here because it's probably more clear. Font group, we'll hit the bucket up top, and then I'm going to make it this blue. If that blue isn't available to you, then go to this more colors, and you can make it any color you want. But we're going to go to the standard colors here, and it's on white, and I'm going to make it this blue because the Excel is Fun guy used to use that color, and now that's what I use. So that's what I do. So I'm going to say, okay, there it is, and then we're going to go to the font item here, drop down on the font item, and then we're going to go to the all borders. So we'll put the borders around it. So there we have our data input. Next, we're going to create basically the trial balance. I'll try to color code it by the type of accounts we're going to have. So I'm going to make this column I, a little bit smaller. So I'm going to put my cursor right here. So I want a spacer column because I don't want it right next to it. Make that a little bit smaller, like so. And then I'm going to have here something like the accounts that are going to be listed in the trial balance. Then I got the beginning trial balance, the entries, and the ending trial balance. So I'm going to make these accounts a little bit larger. Now, the beginning, if I say beginning trial balance, I have a problem because I could say, okay, beginning trial balance, that's really long, and I want it to fit in this column. So I could do this. I could go up top, and I could say home tab. We're gonna wrap it, alignment, and wrap the text, and then center it. That's one way I can do it, but then it makes this whole column really wide. And if I do anything on the right-hand side that has the less amount of space that's needed, then I might not need that. So I sometimes, unless I'm creating it or making it into a table, instead of doing that, I'm just going to undo, and I'm just going to use the number of cells that I need. So I'm going to call this beginning, and then the next column trial balance for the header. And that way I can have my full header spaced out the way I want it. And then I can also just make it look like a header without 3 columns with using color formatting. And then I'm going to pull this accounts down to the bottom. So it's right down there at the bottom. And then we're going to say entries. This is going to be the entries column. And then I'm going to have the ending trial balance here. So then let's go ahead and center these. I'm going to do this as my heading type thing again. So we're going to select these items and we're going to center it. We're going to go into the font group. We're going to hit the paint bucket and make it black and white there. We'll do the same thing here, making it, I'm not going to center it, but I'm going to make it black and white in the font group, paint bucket, black and white. So there we have that. Now I'm just going to list out the accounts. These accounts, we're just imagining these accounts. Some of these are going to be the major accounts that we'll be using, and some of them I'll kind of point them out as we go. But the idea is that we want the accounts in assets, liabilities, equity, and then the income statement. So starting this off, we would say, okay, the checking account, which you might put as cash from general accounting standpoints, And then I'm going to add undeposited funds, which is an item you might use when using like QuickBooks software, or it's an in-between item, like some kind of software. It doesn't have to be QuickBooks, but any kind of software you might be using some kind of in-between account, like you're holding on to the cash, but you haven't put it into the checking account yet. And we'll talk more about that later. And that's something you might not see as much in normal kind of accounting classes that aren't using, say, software, because they're not really digging into the breakout between the different types of cash accounts for purposes of lining up the bank reconciliation. So we'll talk more about that later. So then we're going to say accounts receivable, and that's going to be a standard account. So that's often there whenever you're using accrual methods for the collection, inventory, assets for the sales cycle. So if we sell inventory, if you don't have inventory, then of course you wouldn't have it. I'm going to call this one furniture and equipment. Now that one, I'm combining two things together. I'm basically putting all my property, plant, and equipment, or furniture and equipment, in one account instead of breaking out the fixed assets, but they're going to be long-term assets. I'm going to call this accumulated depreciation. So that's the depreciation related to it. And then we're going to go to the liabilities, which is accounts payable. I'm going to call payroll taxes, fairly standard. Payroll liabilities, liabilities, which is taxes payable. And then sales tax, we're going to assume we have to pay sales tax payable. And now I'm going to go to the equity side of things, which I'm going to have owner's draws, assuming it's a sole proprietorship and they draw money out. Owner draws and owner's equity, which is kind of like retained earnings if it were a C corporation. Then we're going to go to the revenue accounts, sales or revenue. Cost of goods sold, only used if we sell inventory. Then we've got, I'm going to call insurance expense, fairly standard expense. Miscellaneous expense, fairly standard, but something you want to be careful of using too much. Office supplies, payroll expense, telephone expense, and utilities. Utilities. I think I didn't spell that right. I'll use this, then spell check if you can't spell utilities right, and see if you got it close enough so it fixes it properly. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so then that I'd like to now color code these just to make it a little bit easier on the eye. I wouldn't do this all the time for my personal practice, but it is often easier to use. So I like to break that out, and it might be easier for us to focus in on here. And it's good practice in Excel for formatting's sake. So let's add the green ones are going to be the assets. So assets go on down here to the accumulated depreciation. I'm going to make those green with a dark green background and a light green on the font. So we're going to go to the font group. Let's make it a bucket here. And I'm going to choose this really dark green on the background. And then on the lettering, I'm going to make it the light green so it stands out. Hopefully that stands out enough so everybody can see it. And so there we have that. And then in the liabilities, I'm going to make this one on the font group, going to make this one bucket dark orange. And then the lettering, I'm going to make light orange. Maybe this one, even that one might even be better. If I go this one or this one. This one, are those the same? Anyways, I'll choose this one. That's what I had before. And then we're going to say the owner's draws. We're going to say I'm going to make this blue drop down. We got the blue, which was it this one or this one that I think I used this one. I want to make it line up with my example, this one. And then we're going to make this the light blue. And so then the revenue and expenses, I'm going to put this all in one group because this is kind of the same. This is basically part of equity. The whole income statement is kind of part of equity. I'll talk more about that when we go through the practice problem. So I'd still like to make this blue and blue, but I'm going to make it slightly different blue. I'll try to make it like this blue so it stands out a little differently. And the lettering will make basically this blue up top. So it looks a little bit different. So now we can see it. These are kind of related is what I'm trying to get at. But This is the revenue and the expenses, and I don't have any special different color for the expenses the way I'm going now. Now, you can also then say, well, I don't have the grid lines anymore. And if I try to put the grid lines in, if I go up top and put the grid lines in, they're there, but they're not really that distinct because now I got these dark things. So that might be good. You might want to make the grid lines white then, which you can do, so they'll stand out a bit more. So you could go then and go to the font group drop down, go all the way down to the more borders, and say I'm going to make the colors white like that. And then I'm going to choose the border all around and everything inside, which you can't really see down here because we chose white, so you can't really see what's going on. But if you say okay, then there it is. Now you got the white borders, which might stand out a little bit more than the black ones. I'm not sure which you'd prefer, but you could test those two out. Then I'm going to put the numbers in. We're just making up the numbers here. Now note, what I'd like to do is make a good series of test numbers up front because I'm making, in essence, a practice problem. So what you would normally do is try to put in all the test numbers and then use one number as kind of like a plug number, which you might say is going to be like the equity. So for example, I might do something like this, like I want like 100,000 for cash, nothing starting off in the undeposited funds, accounts receivable, 2,000, let's say, and then inventory 4375, let's say. I know that's a weird number, but then I'm going to say 16,000 for furniture and fixture. And the accumulated depreciation should be negative 4,000 or something, negative something, because it's a contra asset account. The liabilities, I'm going to put negative. Notice here, I'm representing the credits with a negative number and not in a credit column. The reason I'm doing that is because, one, I think you'll see that from an Excel standpoint, it's easier to calculate. And two, if I used a debit and credit column instead of this format, I would have 6 columns instead of only having the 3 columns that we would need, making the worksheet way longer than it needs to be. Also note that I started this on row 3, I just noticed, and I'd rather bring it up to row 1. So I totally did that on purpose so I can show you how to delete these 2 rows. Not really, but let's delete these 2 rows. Putting my cursor on 1, dragging to 2, let go, right click on that area, right click on it, it's not letting me right click, there it goes, and then delete. So there we have it. So now this is going to be negative representing a credit. I'm going to make this 0, 0. Draws, I'm going to keep it at 0 right now. And then the equity, I'm going to say, let me skip that one, and that'll like be my plug, and I'll go back in and fill those in at a later time. So then we've got the revenue is going to, I'm going to say, let's make that negative 200,000. I'm going to say cost of goods sold. Let's make that, I'm going to say like it's 80%. So I'm going to say negative of that 200 times like 80% because the cost of goods sold markup and so on, about 80%. Then I'm going to say 1600, 600, 490, 800, 2700, 1900 sounds about right. And that'll give us my total debits and credits. And so I'm going to sum this up, and it should add up to 0 if the debits were positive and the credits were negative and they were the same. And that's my check figure. That's why it's so nice to have the credits as negative so that you can have this nice, easy formula for a check. It's not in balance because my plug is going to be up here. Now, there's something else that's a little bit different than my practice problem, however, too, and that's the payroll. I'm going to make the payroll 8,000. And so now I'm going to do my thing here. I'm going to say, okay, now it's off by 9265. I'm going to plug that into owner's equity. I'm just going to say, all right, that's equity. Negative 92065. Now it's in balance. The debits equaling the credits. So now we got something we can work with. We'll continue creating this in the next presentation.